Minus 15 degrees. Wind chill is making it feel like minus 20. And I'm standing in a very long line, outdoors, with about 200 other people waiting to see Bonhomme's Ice Palace. A few kilometers away, there's another crowd waiting to slide down the Toboggan Ice Slide at Dufferin Terrace. Tomorrow, I will watch grown adults willingly dive into a snowbank wearing nothing but a swimsuit. I'm not brave enough to participate in that one. While most cities see tourism collapse in winter, Quebec City turned its biggest weakness, the brutal cold, into a revenue gold mine by creating the world's largest winter carnival. The annual celebration held in February each year draws hundreds of thousands of tourists to the city to join in the winter fun. For context, this was my first time attending the carnival and I was wowed. And since it's my first, I really don't have any baseline from prior years to compare it with. By every rule of tourism economics, this city should be a ghost town right now. Hotels should be empty. Restaurants should be begging for customers. The streets should belong to locals hurrying from one heated building to the other. Instead, we are all moving from one ice sculpture to another and sliding down a frozen ice slide. How does a city in one of the coldest regions of North America turn its single biggest liability into one of the most economically sophisticated tourism machines on the continent? I'd done my research before coming here and I thought I understood the scale, but honestly, I did not expect the amount of people I saw on the streets. In this video, I'm going to examine the major problem the city faced, the business model and economic impacts of the carnival, why it works and why people come, and the challenges. Let me start with the problem because that's what makes the solution so impressive. Most cities with cold winters face what economists call the shoulder season problem, and Quebec City before 1955 had it worse than almost anywhere. And here's what made it particularly tricky. Quebec City's economy outside of tourism was heavily dependent on provincial government jobs. The city was economically exposed every single winter. Hotels have high fixed costs. Empty rooms still cost money. Same thing for restaurants. So in 1954, a group of local businessmen sat down and asked a question that sounds almost simple in retrospect. What if we stopped fighting the cold and started selling it? The first official Quebec Winter Carnival launched in 1955. It was modest by today's standards, but introduced something that would prove to be an extraordinarily durable idea, that winter itself could be a tourism product. Now, let's follow the money, because this is where the carnival stops being just a fun event and starts being a genuinely clever economic machine. The carnival runs for 10 days every February. Hundreds of thousands of people pass through, and the direct economic impact generates millions of dollars in revenue for that single 10-day window. So where does all that money come from? The first and most visible bucket is accommodation. During Carnival, Quebec City's hotel occupancy surges significantly. Hotels that would otherwise be bleeding money during their worst months are suddenly at near capacity. And because demand spikes predictably, prices spike with it. So a room that would cost $120 in maybe November would now cost $250 or $300 during peak carnival weekend. I decided last minute to attend the festival and I almost wasn't able to find a good place to stay in the whole city. Quebec City during carnival is one of the few places in Canada where booking 9 days out feels like last minute. And people aren't just paying for a bed, they're coming for things that you genuinely cannot experience anywhere else. The ice canoe races across the St. Lawrence River, for instance, with teams rowing and dragging canoes across the half-frozen river in brutal wind and extremely cold conditions. It sounds insane. It is insane. And it's exactly the kind of thing people fly across the country to witness. The second is food and beverage. Winter is when restaurants in cold climate cities face a serious challenge. Do you stay open, pay staff, and eat up a half-empty room all winter? Or do you close and then face the rehiring, restocking, and slow restarts that comes with reopening in the spring? Carnival solves that equation entirely. It's not just a good 2 weeks, it's often the 2 weeks that makes the whole year viable. Some restaurants in Old Quebec may do up to 20 to 25% of their annual revenue in this single 10-day window. On one of the days I was there, it took over 30 minutes for anyone to take my brunch order, and even longer for the food to actually arrive. The restaurant was clearly not adequately staffed for this volume, because they can't afford to carry that many staff year-round. The city's physical infrastructure, the parade routes, the public spaces, the hotels, all of this have been refined over 70 years. But labor doesn't work that way. You can't stockpile trained wait staff the way you can maintain a parade route. Now, another bucket is transportation. Quebec City's airport sees a major spike in arrivals during the carnival season. Via Rail also sees increases in the Montreal-Quebec corridor. Local taxi and ride-share demand jump significantly. Car rental is essentially sold out weeks in advance. This is not revenue the carnival itself captures directly. They are spillover revenue. Money flowing into the broader economy because the event itself created a reason to travel. That's what economists call the multiplier effect. And it's the real secret of why the carnival model works so well. Here's how it works in plain terms. A tourist from maybe Vancouver spends $400 at a Quebec City hotel. The hotel pays its staff. Those staff buy groceries at a local supermarket. The supermarket orders more inventory from a local distributor. The distributor hires seasonal drivers. Every dollar spent once gets spent multiple times inside the local economy. So, what does the carnival actually earn directly? And that brings us to the fourth point. The fourth is ticketed events and the carnival pass. And this is very interesting because the pricing strategy is deliberate. The main carnival pass is the effigy and it's priced accessibly, not at a premium. I got mine on pre-sale for $35, taxes included. A festival that prices out families stops being a mass cultural event and really starts being a niche luxury product. And niche luxury products don't generate millions of dollars in economic impact in 10 days. So the carnival makes its real money not by extracting maximum value from each visitor, but by maximizing the number of visitors who come and spend across the whole ecosystem. And then there's sponsorships. Major Canadian corporations across food brands, banks, telecom companies, outdoor gear retailers, they pay significant fees to associate their brand with the carnival. And this is not unique to Quebec, but the carnival has leveraged over 70 years of brand equity to command premium rates. When your event is one of the largest carnival in the world, sponsors know the audience is real. So tickets and sponsorship revenue funds better attractions. Better attractions draw more tourists. More tourists fuel more hotels at higher rates. Higher hotel rates generates more tax revenue. Tax revenue flows back into the infrastructure. Better infrastructure supports the next carnival. And around it goes. But here's the thing. Other cities have tried to copy this. And most of them have failed, or at least underperformed relative to Quebec's scale. So what specifically makes Quebec City's version work when others struggle? I think there are 5 major pillars, and they're quite interconnected. The first is strategic timing. The carnival runs from early to mid-February, and that is very intentional. It sits in what I'll call the calendar void. It's the dead zone after New Year's excitement has faded and just before March winter break gives family a natural reason to travel. There's also a weather logic at play here. Quebec City is cold enough during that period that the winter experience feels authentic and reliable. You're not going to show up and find a slushy, half-melted mess. But it's also not so extreme that logistics collapse. Events can run, people can walk between them, the infrastructure can function. The next is scale, and this might be the single most important economic lesson in this whole video. Some winter festivals fail not because they're bad events, hopefully not. They fail because they don't justify the cost of travel. If a festival has 30 activities over a weekend, that's a day trip. Maybe you drive 2 hours, spend one day, go home. Quebec's carnival has hundreds of activities across 10 days. That justifies a flight. That justifies booking a hotel for 4 nights. That justifies budgeting up to $2,000 for the whole trip. And when I say activities, I don't mean variations of the same thing. I mean genuinely distinct experiences. The opening and closing night parade running through Old Quebec at minus 15 degrees, tens of thousands of people lining streets that are 4 centuries old, watching floats go by in conditions that would cancel most outdoor events in most cities. Bonhomme's Ice Palace rebuilds from scratch every single year, just for a snowman. Ice sculptures scattered across the entire old city that you stumble across between restaurants and shops. The Toboggan Ice Slide at Dufferin Terrace, where the lineup tells you everything you need to know about demand. And then, and this one genuinely surprised me, the snow bath, where participants strip down to swimsuits in public in minus 15 degree weather and dive into a snowbank with Bonhomme, who is very supportive about the whole thing, by the way. Each of these is a social media moment. Each of them is a reason to stay one more night. Collectively, they are what separates a festival that justifies a flight from one that doesn't. The economics of a 4-night stay versus a day trip are not 4 times better, they are exponentially better. Because multi-night visitors eat more meals, buy more merchandise, take more tours, and bring larger groups. The density of programming also solves a problem that kills most outdoor winter festivals. What do you do when it's too cold to be outside? Quebec's answer is to have enough indoor programming that you never have to choose between freezing and going home. You simply move between the outdoor and indoor events, and spending happens in both places. The third pillar is cultural authenticity. Cultural authenticity. This one is harder to quantify and harder to pronounce apparently, but it may be the hardest to replicate. Quebec City is genuinely one of the most unique urban environments in North America. Fortified walls, 17th century architecture, predominantly French-speaking, European in character. Tourists pay a premium for that feeling of authenticity. They will drive past a dozen manufactured Winter Wonderland events to get to something that feels real. The opening and closing night parade is a good example of this. It's not a polished corporate production. It's a community event that happens to be enormous. Floats, performers, marching bands, all moving through streets that have looked roughly the same for 300 years. In the cold. And the snowbirds. The fact that this tradition even exists, that people willingly and enthusiastically remove most of their clothing in sub-zero temperatures as a form of celebration, tells you something about the relationship Quebec has with its winters. They're not tolerating the cold. They've built a culture around it. And you can't fake that for tourists. And here's the savvy part. The carnival has Bonhomme. It's a giant snowman mascot that has been the face of the festival since 1955. Children adore him. Adults find him charming. He's, economically speaking, an effective brand asset. And it doesn't cost anything to maintain. Because it's a snowman. It simply leaves after the carnival to maybe the North Pole and then comes back again next year. The fourth point is infrastructure advantage. Quebec City has something that no other city can buy. Over 70 years of compounding physical and logistical infrastructure investments specifically built around this event. The massive public spaces where many main events take place require no rental costs and no permit negotiation. Parade routes are established. Eating viewing areas exist. The city's snow removal operation has been optimized for carnival crowds over decades. Hotels were built or expanded because the carnival made February viable. That hotel stock now reinforces the carnival's ability to scale. It's a chicken and egg problem that Quebec City solved 50 years ago. And then there's marketing. 70 years of global media coverage means the Carnival's marketing budget punches far above its weight. When Tourism Quebec promotes the Carnival internationally, they are amplifying a brand that already has recognition. That's an enormous advantage over a 10-year-old festival that is still trying to build awareness from scratch. And the fifth pillar is the government role. And this is a nuanced take that matters a lot if you're interested in this as a policy model. In 2022, the government, through Canada Economic Development, provided a grant of $3 million for Carnaval de Quebec. In 2024, the Carnival received over $9 million from the Government of Canada. Now, you may be looking at those numbers and thinking, $9 million doesn't sound like a festival that is standing on its own 2 feet. And that's fair. But context matters here. The Carnival generates hundreds of millions in economic activity and tax revenue for the province. So when the government puts in $9 million, they're not subsidizing the cultural expense. They're investing in infrastructure that returns multiples. Government still contributes, but it's not keeping the events alive. Compare this to festivals that became permanently dependent on subsidies and then collapsed when political priorities shifted. Quebec's Carnival no longer needs rescue. It generates the tax base that funds its own support. Now, I spent a lot of this video making the Carnival sound close to perfect. And in many ways, it's a genuinely impressive piece of economic design. But there are 3 things that could seriously threaten everything we just discussed. The first is climate change. Average February temperatures in Quebec City have risen since the 1980s. While the Earth itself has warmed by 0.8 degrees Celsius over the last 70 years, Quebec's average annual temperature has increased by 1.1 degrees Celsius. And there are projections that the average temperature in Quebec could increase by 6.6 degrees Celsius in winter. That might not sound like much, but in a festival whose central attractions are literally made of ice and snow, that's significant. There have already been years where warming mid-festival puts ice structures under serious stress. And that's a logistical and PR problem that organizers are very reluctant to talk about publicly. The Carnival has responded by investing in more indoor programming. But indoor programming is less photogenic, less shareable, and less unique. The authenticity advantage I described earlier, it depends on actual winter. If February in Quebec City starts feeling like February in Vancouver, the proposition of this festival becomes genuinely uncertain. The second threat is competition. Ottawa's Winterlude, St. Paul's Winter Carnival, Edmonton's Ice on White. Other cities have studied the Quebec model and are building their own versions. Internationally, Sapporo Snow Festival in Japan and Iban Ice and Snow Festival in China also run massive ice and snow festivals. In fact, the Quebec's Winter Festival used to be the world's largest festival for years before Urban in China came along. Quebec's defense is its heritage brand and its walkability. The compactness of old Quebec means the festival's experience has a density that spread out cities struggle to match. But brand advantages may erode if competitors consistently outspend and out-innovate. The third threat is over-tourism risk. Old Quebec was built for a fraction of the crowd it now handles. 400-year-old streets were not designed for hundreds of thousands of visitors in 10 days. If the city grows the festival past the point where locals feel ownership of it, the cultural authenticity that is a core economic asset starts to degrade. There's a real tension between bigger and better that the Carnival's organizers are navigating in real time. Now, the real lesson here isn't just about a festival. It's about what a city chooses to do with its disadvantages. Every city has an off-season. Every city has something: weather, geography, demographics, economic cycles, something that makes part of the year other than others. And the default response is to endure those periods, cut costs, wait it out. What Quebec City did in 1955 was refuse that logic. They looked at a February cold that would make most people stay at home and built an economy around the cold. Winter didn't disappear, they simply learned to monetize it. That act of reframing, turning a liability into an identity, is something that is genuinely replicable. Not the specific festival itself, not the Ice Palace, not Bonhomme. There can only be one Bonhomme, by the way. But the underlying decision that in every liability, there might be an economy waiting to be built. And if you're curious whether any of this is actually worth the money as a traveler, my next video breaks down exactly what I spent in 2 days at the carnival. The number might surprise you.